get started. Thank you, everybody who's joining us in our roundtable about mastering digital transformation, and which is quite a large topic. So this is a roundtable, means definitely, I would say it's defined and it's designed for us to share practices and to interact together and to be with an audience of givers to address various topics. I'm Michel. I'm the Director of Information Software and Strategic Development Software at Rockwell Automation, and I will be the moderator of this roundtable. A few little tips and tricks that I would like you to be aware of. Hold on a second. As this would be, this is a roundtable, as I've just mentioned, really to interact. After a few slides that I'm just showing up here, definitely I will ask you to activate your video or your sound by clicking on the top right corner button on activate and share audio and video. That will help effectively for us to be to see each other in a virtual room. Here are the various topics that we intend to cover in our conversation. And to assist me in that conversation, I'm delighted to introduce Emmanuelle Camus, who is Senior VP at PDC EMEA, and will definitely launch one of the first topic, which is about all the major, I would say, challenges, risks, threats, but also great opportunities that we all in the IT world, CIOs, IT managers, are definitely facing. And the session is also designed to be, I would say, meaningful for all of you. So feel free to effectively ask questions, to provide insight or your own experience for others to comment, as well as for us. Aline Istas, which is also joining us in that session, will also launch a poll in a few minutes or seconds, and I invite you definitely to address and answer to that poll that will give us additional insights to drive our conversation. Having said that, I will introduce now Emmanuelle Camus, and Emmanuelle, if you want to give a few words about yourself, and definitely provide to launch us some insights about what has effectively changed or accelerated in 2020 and in the early starts of 2021.
Thank you very much, Michel. Hello, everybody. So yeah, I'm Emmanuelle Camus. I'm leading the alliances at PTC for Europe. I've been at PTC for a long time, so I'm helping you as CIO, IT directors, IT ambassadors, choosing the best solution to help in digital transformation. And today's topic is to speak about a few challenges. And I'm very honored to start this panel to speak about the COVID-19 challenges. So you may have seen that on the screen, on your screen on the right, you've got a small window called polls. And we kindly ask you to vote, which is your challenge. Okay, I begin to see a vote, which is great. We try to keep it as interactive as possible to really understand which challenges you face. We've heard in the session before that innovation sometimes is coming the latest priority for you CIOs, IT directors, IT ambassadors, because you have so much to do. Okay, so much to do with your incumbent systems, so much to do with data security. And some of the COVID crisis has just forced us as a company to look at new technologies. So I'm very keen to hear from anybody here in the audience about what was the hardest challenge. I see here on the vote that a few are speaking about remote work, but I see that many of you say it's another one, which is interesting. So happy to start hearing from anybody here in the panel who wants to start. We always need someone to jump into the discussion. When we've got US people, it's easier to do it, but I welcome anybody who wants to start commenting. Again, we don't want it to be a presentation from us. We want it to be your session so you can discuss.
Well, I'm really, excuse me, Emmanuelle, asking you any relationship with Albert?
You know what? In the past, I tried to make people think I've got some relation to Albert, but the truth is not. But
Okay, anyhow, no, it's just a question. I mean,
yeah.
I'm sorry, nothing personal.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say that in what way are you thinking the digital transformation is something so much different from IT? Because basically, IT is a constant digital transformation. So why do we make such a fuss about it?
Yeah, I guess we just see an acceleration, and this is why we've got this session. We want to see you speaking about the challenges you face with the velocity. Okay, we say we also hear that.
But excuse me, but speed, increasing speed, it happens while we drive the cars, while we travel. In everywhere we see increasing speed. I mean, in IT, increasing speed, it's nothing new.
Okay.
If I may make a comment.
No, it's not. It's not
Can somebody hear me?
new now.
Alain, yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I would not necessarily say that in every sector of industry you have seen an acceleration of the transformation. I'm working in the healthcare industry, and one of the reasons that I answered about others is because one of the key things that was creating a lot of flows on the side of IT is basically about a bunch of new flows of data that were mandatory and required. So basically, it was not necessarily requiring to implement new technology or something of this kind. The only thing that you had to do is basically making sure that you would be reporting on time. And I can tell you that it's strictly linked also with the maturity of your organization. But if you are not necessarily in a large maturity organization, I can tell you that the element of infrastructure would be something like email, Excel, and things like this. And this is the way the flow will be implemented. I would even be tempted to say that on most aspects, some key projects have been put on hold. And for me, in some area, actually, COVID has creating a deceleration of the, it looks a little bit, strange, in comparison to what you read in the press, but, don't believe all what you read.
Well, I agree with you, Alain, but the thing I worry as I'm going now and then to a doctor, because you talk about healthcare perspective, I can tell you the outdate of their PC is really worrying me. That is a real worry, because I'm afraid that the imaging programs and other software are outdated to an extent that I would consider myself in danger.
Worse than that, actually, Jan, worse than that. There are some equipment that we are using, and it's forbidden for us to upgrade them because otherwise they would lose their certification. And the vendor supporting those actually are clear. They cannot keep up actually with those changes. They really live on their legacy, and as a result, you are stuck with them. So it's really worse than that. But
well,
that's a long discussion.
Yeah,
but to the extent talking about the digital transformation, you really have to be aware of a couple of factors for assessing that. One of them is obviously the capabilities of the organization to understand the capabilities of the technology, but also agility and the resources in the organization to adhere to this speed of change. But also you have to consider the regulation and the practices that are existing. I can tell you a long story about the devices also and things like this, which are basically, leading edge, if you would be in the 50s, previous century, and things like this. So that's really component that you have to take into account.
Yeah.
Eric, you want to comment? You just need to unmute yourself.
Yeah. It's also a question behind what do we put behind digital transformation. I think that there is, for me, I will split more or less in 3 domains. The first is the remote work capabilities. I think in that stage, COVID accelerates that clearly, because everyone has to work from home, or a lot of people have to work from home. It was not the case before. The second element is more, I would say, the customer part. Are we able to continue to digitalize our relationship with our customers, prospects, and things like that? For me, this part is mainly linked to the financial situation of the sectors. For example, for Thalys, which is international railway company, it looks like an airline companies. We have a drastic budget decrease because there is no queue at that time, in more or less months. So of course the budget for projects decrease, but we secure the fact that everyone can work in remote and things like that. So it's really two different topics. As a second element is most internal digital transformation, or you transform your internal processes, how you become more efficient, react quickly, and at that stage, I say it's why I put others. My concern is how I can decrease my running costs, not only IT but company-wise. And of course, at that level, I can have budget for project if the capex is lower than the OPEX saving, more or less.
Yeah.
And that's one of the challenge of today for me, and probably a lot of sectors, is that your project could be, the ROI of your project could be much quicker than a year ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's a trend. I guess Michel will discuss just a bit later the pace of acceleration and the time to value, as we say.
Yeah, exactly.
The time to value, and it's a key thing we hear, and we heard a lot about agility, and I guess it's just aligning with the business and sustain your ability to sustain the pace of that transformation, because we know that in the next 3 years, most of the business model will change. So how do we align with it?
And in our company, we were mainly project driven. I say we was quite a young company. Thalys is 25 years, but with a big acceleration in 2019, more or less. So it's quite new. No IT before 2019, so 2015, sorry. So it's quite a new company. So it was mainly project driven. So the big change that we have to do in 6 months is to become, I would say, design to cost driven. So it means that we will have a capacity for development, for example, and the company will have to learn to prioritize all the demand that you have. Before it was quite easy. Business has some projects, and they have the money to have dedicated developers and dedicated business analysts and project managers. Not the case today. We have the resources that we have, and we have to prioritize within our resources. So it's moving from project driven to, I would say, evolution driven, more or less. It's a pure backlog and sprint and things that we have to manage the capacity in that way. So it's a big change for the business to be able to prioritize their demand and to bring not within their department, but also in challenge versus the demand of other departments.
Yeah, across the company.
So that's really a big change.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Eric. Does that mean that you have to, as you have your resources focusing on what you just described, does that impact the way you're organizing them? Because you may have two pillars of major activity. One is more to ensure business continuity with infrastructure, classical IT, I would say, while preparing effectively this agile approach on short ROI.
I say we adapt. Yeah, we adapt quite significantly during the last 2 quarters, more or less. So we decide to consolidate some suppliers and to put, because if we consolidate, we normally have a economy of scale. So for example, one supplier supports 6 applications last year. We decide that it will support 12. And of course, we optimize the resource to support the application. In parallel, we stop all, I will say, exotic technologies that the business want to do, and we decide to keep a certain number of technologies that we support, and not to open the door to new one, also to have efficiency. And on the project side, we decide to internalize some competencies also. For example, business analysts were mainly external people. And with the fact that we do not have a lot of projects, we cannot keep them from one project to another today. And I consider that losing business analyst knowledge is big risk. So to be very efficient, a business analyst needs to know the domain where he works. And we decide to internalize 2 business analysts, one on the what we call our operation, Huawei operation side, and one on the e-commerce and customer side.
Right.
Just to be sure that we keep this knowledge, even if we have some additional resource sometimes, but be sure that we internalize some knowledge. And the second point is that we change the governance with the business, and we have not project review, but we have monthly review, and we make demand management prioritization with the business more, I would say, frequently.
Yeah, Eric, I have a question for you. Closing your door to so-called exotic technologies doesn't bring you out of digital transformation? Because most exotic technologies bring in digital transformation.
Yeah, well, yes and no. I say historically, I would say supplier was mainly chosen by business. Today is not the case anymore. It's we listen the preference of the business, but that we keep the last word to be sure that the supplier is coming with technologies that we can support. We have the competencies internally or with our IT partners. It's clearly, I would not say a short term, but a context decision. Of course, it doesn't mean that we will not open the doors to new technology if those technology bring value to us. But it will be a decision. It will not arrive via suppliers signed by the business without IT involvement, for example. So it's more a control than the fact that we will not add new technology. But you are right. At that time, for the coming probably 2-3 quarters, we will not open the doors to new things. And it's important to keep in mind that we cannot continue like that for years, because at that time we will just be of
Eric, and the other
between business, between savings and constraints, and be sure that we not put at risk the long term. So you are fully right.
And Eric and others, have you seen that with the COVID and the inability for people to travel, some business situation has just been blocked? So this is where we've seen technologies helping to keep the business continuity. We've got examples of augmented reality remote assistant use cases where people could still operate the delivery of some factories and doing the provisioning and setup of the factory through technologies, and it was never used. So have you just seen that with this new reality?
Not so much in our sector.
Well, I wouldn't dare to suggest to Eric, instead of selling tickets for someone to go to Paris, to sell him a virtual reality trip into Louvre. That would be kind of a special proposition, right? Yeah. Have you considered that, Eric, selling virtual reality tickets to Louvre?
To be honest, we were more to extend our capabilities around the travel itself by hotel and things like that versus moving to virtual reality, to be honest.
Because it would be much better for me to stay home and visit Louvre rather than you up.
I see Anne-Marie Depiper is also joining us. We don't hear you, Anne-Marie, and we don't see you as well. Maybe you have some point to react on the conversation. And I will give also a chance to Alain, which is with us and shares his video on screen to potentially react on the questions of Emmanuelle. Alain, do you hear us?
Maybe I can
possibly to have
go ahead.
possibly to have the things clear in my mind. The question actually, which question are you referring to?
I was mentioning, and I can give you an example because we had Pierre Massai earlier on stage, and for example, with this customer, they have experimented the use of augmented reality to do remote assistance, and we will speak later about the ecosystem and the partnership, and together between Rockwell, Microsoft, and PTC, we have provided technology even for free during the crisis to really solve business issues because people could not travel, people could not be on site. And so we've just seen the acceleration of use of SaaS technology, and it's also part of the panel today. I saw that in the polls, the SaaS cloud was not so much a first idea, but when you look also in the automotive industry, the CAD engineers from one day from the others have become remote workers. So when we are remote workers like us using Teams, it's pretty easy. Using Zoom, it's pretty easy. When you use heavier tool, which are usually set up on internal network, how do you enable them to do remote work? And we just see a huge acceleration of these tools. And it seems that people will not quit these new technologies. They have, it's like remote work. People don't want to go back to the office. They want to do this hybrid. So it was an open question to you, in fact.
Okay, well, actually, to your question, the answer is probably yes and probably no at the same time. For multiple reasons. If you would consider a car manufacturer, or if you would take an hospital, a decent amount of the personnel have to be on site. Full stop. So you cannot actually take care of patients remotely. There is also another aspect. Actually, it might be linked to the public sector, but by default, the rule was that working from home was not part of the policy and was forbidden. So none of the infant was actually covered by that. So the question was much more, can we implement a deviation of it, and to which extent can you do it? And one of the elements actually that I could add to this thing, and why the remote working was not that much of a factor, for instance, for us, is that a lot of processes are still relying on, unfortunately, on a lot of paper. So if your processes are on paper, there is no way that you can do really remote working. The flow is not going to work. And some information actually would be extremely confidential, document, and by rules, they simply are not entitled, to leave the premises. This is why actually in some places actually remote working was not working. I was also telling that some of the functions were basically shut down, and some people were put in an employment status just because those tasks could not be employed. So all the persons that were employed basically don't need only remote working. Now the question for some of the person that would need it, possibly, I guess, we were kind of a mode of might be, and this is not typical to one institution, it's a tendency in some industry, a little bit on the gray zone, a little bit of the extension of BYOD, with some risk associated to it. But again, the risk would be marginal because the flow of the data or the access or the activity that would be processed via them actually remain marginal. So again, back to the comment that I did at the beginning, it would be, possibly misleading to assume after in all the context they've been affected the same way and have been, changed behavior or changed way of working the same way. If you are extending to the thing about AI or something like this, I'm aware of some sector where, for instance, in order to help them, they started actually to have some chatbot, for instance, to help. But if you don't have, let's say, the minimal, context in your organization to adhere or to change or to innovate, I would say on the fly, to do that, simply, it's not part of your ecosystem at least on the short run. it would be more sometimes the reverse and say, you know, if we do not have all the leading edge equipment or something of this kind, you know what, we're just going to put it back on paper. And I guess the budget of paper and pencil has possibly increased. So,
yeah, I guess,
you know,
I guess you're right. I guess your challenge is accelerating the automation, and which is what IT is helping for years, and at the same time access to these new technologies, even in the SaaS mode, to be more agile in the way you can answer business needs. And I guess this is the very hard job.
And you also need to be aware that in some sector of industry, you know, when you want to buy something, you have to follow some rules, like they call it in Belgium, marché public or something of this kind. So you cannot in the urgency and say, oh, by the way, I'm gonna buy something like 300 computer, and by the way, I'm gonna work with this supplier to help me to do that because I kind of supposedly need it. Well, by law, no. You cannot just go and sign a contract without going to the official processes. Unless you can really identify somewhere a vital interest, possibly. But so there is you know, there are really a lot of places where you might have a lot of limitation just actually to adhere in a hurry to those new technology and implement those new way, kind of slightly reshaping your operating model. You really need to be aware of the context you are in and the limitation or the constraint, the legal or the financial constraint that might be associated to it. On top of that, you also need to be aware of your ecosystem. I can tell you at some place we have interfaces with administration that actually were simply not able to interface with us, with those standard, with those you know, more leading edge technology. So your investment would be a pure waste of money and time. And you continue to work in a, you know, less sexy, you know, or less modern.
Well, let's, Alain, I wouldn't agree with sexy and modern. You link those two elements. I think if something is not modern, this is being sexy. This is basically very old.
Yeah. Okay. It's a way of speaking.
I agree. I was just joking.
More, no. But no, I know you. Don't worry.
And if we use the modern and sexy, let's use it, whatever. We see, I want, maybe Michel, you can discuss about cloud, because we just see that cloud infrastructure and application are just a foundation on which we can build a secure, fast-moving and innovative company. So
definitely, we see that. I just would like to pause a second for all the guests that are joining and that may have missed just the first minutes. I would say feel free to click on the share video and join us in that conversation. This is a roundtable, and all speakers are welcome.
Thank you for the chat. I guess we see some chat happening too, which is great.
Yeah, some chat. So definitely, I would say cloud, and especially in manufacturing and supply chain, has gone in multiple phases of adoption. I would say on-prem, hybrid, or fully cloud. And there are constraints, as just Alain mentioned, on let's implement the right business where it makes sense to all my constraints and my business partners in my organization. Nevertheless, cloud has the capability to effectively scale faster, not only just in innovation, but also to do minimum viable project, test things, do the innovation that Jan was mentioning or Eric was mentioning earlier. So do you see in that cloud aspect or software as a service, generally speaking, a trend in acceleration and some value that this provides you directly now, even if you have budget constraints or threats on spending?
For me, again, like digital transformation, it's very important to understand what we put behind cloud. For me, there is, I would say, two big blocks. It's probably a little bit more complex than that, but there is an infrastructure story. And if you are big, you can be fast in putting new servers and things like that. So the technology will not drive totally your digital transformation in terms of infrastructure if you are a big organization. I worked for Orange before it was possible to have data centers with thousands of servers and process to put new things in production in hours or days. If you are small, it's another story. And at that time, the cloud, from an infrastructure point of view, it's very valuable to be fast, to have less people. Today, at Thalys, I have 3 people to manage infrastructure. We have hundreds of Azure servers and things like that, but we are able to manage that with less people because it's for a part managed in the cloud. And there is a SaaS story. The SaaS story is another one. Is application, is not infrastructure. And for me, it's 2 different topics.
Yeah.
And the SaaS again, it's really a question of where is your core business and your differentiation. I fight every day with my team and with the business. Say, guys, do not try to be innovative where it creates no value. Do we have to reinvent an ERP for finance? Do we have to reinvent the RH information system or things like that? Because things exist. There is plenty of people with more experience than us who develop those tools. On the opposite, do we want to be innovative on the booking of a train ticket, where is our core business? And at that time, we are not SaaS for the booking. We develop our booking, but we put SaaS for a lot of things where there is limited value creation to be different from the others. And the second benefit for SaaS for me is when you can put the business in control of the application. So you gain time for configuration, for example, like Salesforce, for example. If you have 1 or 2 persons able to configure quickly Salesforce on the business side, you give speed to the company. So I think infrastructure and SaaS for me is really 2 different topics. And even in SaaS, there is where it's more commodities, I would say, and where you want to be different from the other. At that time, you have the opportunity to discuss to go to SaaS or not. But that's the way we articulate our discussion around cloud in Thalys.
Yeah.
Right. So in terms, if I understand you well, Eric, when it comes to Office, you are in favor of Office 365, but if it's a matter of booking tickets, you are in favor of writing your own.
At least to evaluate the opportunity to have a make or buy. Sometime we will also buy something because we open the door to make. For I would say commodities and things like that, we buy.
Yeah.
So for mission critical, you're effectively try to keep
it's not so easy to say to a business that there are commodities. And so
this is a sort of a contradiction within terms.
No,
because they are a commodity.
Even for my own organization, for my own job, sometimes I say part of my job is commodity too. But it's really important to say, do we create value for the company by being different or not? If the result is no, so at that time you don't have to be a specific and focus all your resource and your creativity where you can make the difference for the customer or for the efficiency of the organization. So, but yeah, it's not the way I present the SaaS. It's more the fact that present to the business that they will be more in control. It will be quicker for them. But it's moving from the white page, that historical view of the business. I have a white page. I put all my dream on it. SaaS is the opposite. It's IT. We give you a template. You can fulfill the template. It's because a browser didn't code, so you cannot transform an application through a browser. So that's the big difference of SaaS.
Thanks, Eric. That gives you a valuable insight on that approach as well, on how you tackle some legacy and acceleration in the digital transformation era. But like the time, we have another 5 minutes to run. I would like to ask you a question and introduce the ecosystem theme. I would say, do you see in the current situation positive opportunities for you in your organization? And there's an ecosystem of your customers, suppliers, or partners help you to gain more opportunities personally as taking more power in your organization, but also as a trusted advisor to your organization.
And by the way, there is a new poll on the system to keep you awake and interactive, so be free to answer. But yeah, the question is, what do you expect from the ecosystem and partnership? We see blurry lines, okay, and we discussed it a lot in the previous session about the idea to learn from the others, from your customers, from your suppliers, from universities. How can we manage co-creation, synergies? We speak more and more about co-competition. So happy to hear about anything you may have experimented or new best practices you see in the way you operate with your ecosystem and you would like to share.
Yeah, I would like to understand. I would like to understand what you mean by co-competition, because co-competition sounds to me like a double within terms.
Yeah, so co-competition, I guess this is the way we use it. But it's really the idea to bring potentially two companies that may compete on traditional markets, but you use the strength of the ecosystem to brainstorm about new challenges. So, for example, in the industry, I will not speak about IT, but we've got a STEM in IT. We see more and more innovation centers open to many companies. For example, next to your place, we've got the Aaron Transformation Centers, Aix-la-Chapelle, so pretty close to you, with 100 plus partners. And it's all about innovation, thinking about all kinds of innovation from engineering to manufacturing. And of course, IT and digital transformation is supporting everything. So you've got places where you experiment ideas and you use new technologies and new ways of doing things. And we see it more and more. And you see, yeah, people collaborating, even if they may be competitors on the market selling similar products.
But collaborating afterwards anyhow.
Collaborating after, yeah, something they believe they will be more efficient collaborating together to find a new solution than just doing it by themselves.
Actually, Emmanuelle, on this one, and you know, again, different level of maturity in those time of crisis. You know, one of the things that we have a tendency to neglect would be take the opportunity on the crisis to give some, you know, awareness of the board. It doesn't mean that you will use it now, but creating some, you know, documentation in some case could be really used for board awareness, so that maybe in 2 or 3 or 4 crises, or maybe when they will have another business case for something else, you will leverage from this one. When you have a higher level of maturity in the organization, it's way easier to use the traditional way, but we should not neglect the documentation that the crisis is created, even if it doesn't deliver immediately a change or a transformation.
Yeah, you're totally right, Alain. This is why we see that these experience centers are very useful, because speaking about a use case in theory, showing a tool in theory doesn't project the new way of working, the new processes and new habits. So sometimes when you experiment it on a real machinery, real product, real object, you understand the way you can switch. So usually you are expert, so you understand the technology, but when you are talking to your business stakeholders, sometimes you don't get it. So experimenting in real life is accelerating the adoption of the way of thinking. So it's exactly what you say.